Connor McReynolds, and welcome to The Dinner Party. In this podcast, I ask guests to tell me about their dream dinner parties. I want to know the venue, the menu, and the guest list. Who are the guests? Why are they getting an invite? And how would the conversation go? This week, I am absolutely delighted to be speaking to the star of Mock the Week and Live at the Apollo, Geoff Norcott. On the MASH Report, Geoff is known as the voice of conservative Britain. His political and social commentary has seen him appear on Question Time and Politics Live. He's a fascinating guy, and regardless of your politics, he is such a terrific comedian. I can't wait to chat to Geoff all about his work and his dream dinner party. So without further ado, here's the man himself, Geoff Norcott. Geoff Norcott, hello, thanks so much for joining me on the dinner party.
It's lovely to be here.
How are you today?
I'm all right. I'm just it's this weird thing that's happened for a lot of comedians in lockdown is that I'm very busy with stuff that's not necessarily remunerative, but it's all good fun.
Yeah. Well, I really, really appreciate you taking the
That
time
wasn't a
for
dig,
this.
by the way. That sounded like straight away.
Yeah.
Of all the enumerative things, at least this is straight up fun. At least it's not like a 2-hour meeting.
No, totally. I really appreciate you taking the time and also giving it the thought. It's sort of the one thing I'm banking on is that it is a bit of time out of people's day, but hopefully it's quite a nice thing to talk about your dream dinner party. It's not a podcast where I'm asking people to sort of say, like, tell me about the 5 people who have hurt you most, you know. I'd feel a bit guilty about asking people.
I mean, there's probably somebody that does that podcast, let's be honest.
Probably.
Who hurt you? Some New York comics coming on and going, hey, who hurt you this week? We're talking about abuse, but we're making it funny.
But you've been super busy during lockdown. I mean, kind of writing, online gigs, podcasts. I mean, could you get used to this sort of at-home working type thing? Or
I think it has a place. I mean, I did like a run of online gigs in August called the Front Room Fringe because I just thought the Fringe wasn't happening. People like the Fringe, put the word Fringe in the thing, and they worked very well. They sold well, and before lockdown, maybe I was doing sort of 4 writing days a week. Maybe 3 to 4 gigs and other stuff. That was probably too much. So I've certainly discovered a balance, and just, like a lot of people with commuting, most writing days were in London. So there was kind of 4 hours out of each day there. So I probably keep hold. And I've also upped my own podcast, from bi-weekly to once every week. And I've got a Patreon going for that. So,
cool.
With all these things, but it does mean now that I take that so seriously now. I'm like, there's people who pay decent money for that. I've got to,
the pressure's on.
I've got to make it good. It's not like you can't always say, well, no, you're not paying for it, because actually there's a decent number of people that are.
And you're now in a position where I guess sort of, well, for now anyway, gigs are like traditional gigs are kind of coming back a bit. I see you've got a tour show coming up in the next week.
I've got a few
tour
shows. If people want to go and look on Live Nation, it's always good to plug them before you've actually been entertaining or funny on a podcast. But maybe this is the time to do it. But if you just go Geoff Norcott Live Nation, there's a few dotted around the country. I mean, I was, everyone has their own position on the lockdown dial. Some people were very pro it. Some people enjoyed being locked down. I mean, it didn't sit well with me. I like being out in the world. I like gigging, and I just felt very keen to do what I could. And the comedy industry does have a tendency to be quite apocalyptic about everything. I mean, they're mostly lefties. It's not their fault. So every time there's a bit of news, they're like, "Oh, comedy's dead again." And the most recent lockdown news, as we're talking here, as we are in late September 2020, it didn't really change much. That was how shows were getting sold anyway. Like groups of 2, 4, and 6 done by 10 p.m. I suppose the problem now is if there's any further restrictions, it will probably body slam the whole thing. But for now, I'm still getting out there.
That's great. So did you get involved with kind of, you mentioned the online stuff. What about things like driving gigs that popped up? Did you try any of those? Or?
Yeah, I did one very well organised gig by the Comedy Store. It looked fantastic. It was in Northampton. They had an early and a late show. And I did okay in the early show. I think it was just the sheer adrenaline of being back up there. But in the late show, I just sort of thought it was so far from what I was used to. Now, some comics loved them and some comics really took to them like a duck to water. But I would say that I and everybody who saw that performance would agree that I wasn't perhaps in that group.
Is it because you kind of thrive on sort of seeing the whites of people's eyes and actually being able to interact with people, whereas obviously in the drive-in you can't do that?
Yeah, and I think obviously I should have known that, and every comic thrives on that. But I personally, I'm very, it made me realise how much I listen for the laugh and I look for the laugh, and not just that, but just to ride out the mood of the room. Uh,
Yeah, yeah,
it's a very organic thing with me. I change order of stuff, I change the wording of stuff all the time, and without any
yeah.
guide other than me, what you're then down to is your own self doubt, and that's the
Yes.
only thing you can hear.
That's not a great quality in any format of a gig, I suppose. Geoff, your comedy is obviously so synonymous with your politics, kind of moving away from what we were talking about before. And I don't want to focus too much on that because I'm guessing like 90% of what people want to talk to you about in interviews is your politics and stuff, because that is what we see a lot of you talking about on
Mm.
TV, on things
Yeah,
like Question
I
Time.
don't mind. I mean, I always sort of say that in anything that I'm doing, it will be split three ways between politics, like big P politics, what's going on
Yeah,
within party political sort of environments. Then it will be kind of social commentary, the big
yeah,
ticket issues of whether it's Black Lives Matter or whether it's a kind of sexual politics, that kind of thing.
yeah,
And then
yeah,
it will be observational comedy. It's always be, to be honest, even before I was known for talking about politics, that was kind of how it was. I've certainly stepped up.
yeah.
I'm more enmeshed in the kind of ongoing day to day of party political stuff now. But I've always thought that, personally, I would get bored talking about politics for now, and I think most people get bored listening to it. And it is exhaustible. It's not that funny.
Well, it's really interesting because it's like you said, it's not what you, or maybe it was what you talked about before, but it's very much now kind of your brand, I guess. But
Well, I can see
certainly,
looking back that there was routines that I had that were what would now be called contrarian, if you like. So
okay,
so they kind of went against the grain of what most, because I would often find that thing of, I mean, give you an example. When the credit crunch happened, there was a lot of comics that was suddenly like, yeah, the bankers, man, and everyone was just ganging up on the bankers as though they were the sole villains of the piece. And I was sort of thinking, is it just the bankers, or are people idiots for getting 125% mortgages they can afford? So, just simply doing stuff like that. I remember even earlier than that, I remember like they got to a point where every comic had a George Bush routine. And I sort of thought,
yeah,
I just kind of thought, like, well, he's not that stupid, is he? You know what I mean? Like he says stupid things in public, but he's not.
yeah,
And even then, maybe I just tried to defend him just as an exercise, just because I just wanted to hear
yeah,
something
yeah,
different. But when you throw in your own political bias and conviction, which I have, which is broadly centre right,
yeah.
I'd say it's harder to find subjects maybe than a left wing comic, but when you do, they're richer in a way because less people have spoken about them.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot more fruit on that tree that you can pick from, I
Mm.
suppose. But like it's fair to say also the scene is largely very liberal, kind of probably closer to center left or left even. And you speak your mind, and it's always really funny. Right wing comedy, particularly recently with some of the news stories that have come out about the BBC, worried
Mm.
about bias, all that stuff, and you've had to speak out about how just labeling right wing comedy as not funny is just lazy and a stupid point of view, which is absolutely right. But do you ever like get so kind of tired of having to defend that view? Do you ever just think
Well,
like,
yeah, I mean, I
fuck it,
wouldn't.
it would be easier if I spoke about something else? Or
Well, yeah, I mean, but also I've spoken about it in waves ever since, I started talking about this in 2013. So a lot of people would
yeah,
think that I just kind of, in the last couple of years, went, oh, this is a canny little opportunity. But it hasn't been like that. But it comes in waves, basically. Like, so last year when I was announced on the BBC diversity panel, a lot of people
yeah,
just don't, most people don't know who I am. So when it comes around, I mean, as was evidenced by the last discussion when it was Jim, the main people trending
yeah,
were
yeah,
Jim Davison and Bernard Manning, because there's a lot of people that still, that's their last reference point. So you have to go
yeah,
through. But then again, in a weird way, the fact that so many people think such reductive and simplistic things make me think, yeah, I'm ready to, I think it is naive. I think it's weird for people to think that one side got all the funny. I think that's funny in itself, to just think that,
yeah.
that it's like a characteristic that was bestowed. Like people say the devil got all the best tunes. And you think, well, if right wing people are evil. It'd be weird to think that they
Yeah.
had all the good music, but none of the good
Yeah,
comedy.
yeah.
And I think, it may be, I'm not equating my experience directly with that of female comics, but there is a sort of symmetry when you say, one of the three things that people would say about right-wing comics would be they're not naturally funny. That's what they used to say about female comics. There's
Yeah.
no audience for it. That was also what they used to say. And they only speak about the same two subjects, that lot. So I sort of thought there was an irony, particularly when you get
Yeah.
comics, particularly when you get people in the comedy industry that would have been champions of all other forms of diversity. There was
Yeah, yeah.
a little bit of a black hole. I certainly think, if you're coming at comedy from a right of centre perspective, you probably try even harder to not just be mean for the sake of it, if you know what I mean, like, because
Of course, yeah.
that you'll be accused of sort of playing to type. Like, one of the cliches was, oh, we have a right-wing comedian would just want to laugh at the poor. And I thought, I don't think I've ever heard anybody do that as a punchline. I don't know how you get a laugh out of that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that would just be monstrous. It sort of stops being comedy at a point.
Well, I don't
But
even
you're
think
right.
like Jim David or Bernard Manning. I don't think laughing at the poor. Like if you want to equate right wing with bigotry, even still, I think that the main ones were racism and sexism. I
Mhm.
don't think poorism was a thing at
Yeah.
any point, but it's just like, well, they think, oh, right wing equals mean, punching down, down is low, low is poverty, right wingers laugh at the poor.
Yeah, sure. Well, your perspective on it is such an interesting one as well. You mentioned being on the inclusion panel at the BBC, and it wasn't based on your political views; it was your kind of experience of class. And
Mm.
you've spoken so brilliantly on class and how it's sort of the area of diversity that is kind of under considered and underthought, and that's so true. Um, I mean, coming at it from a sort of right wing perspective as well is something quite unexpected. It's all too simplistic to sort of think working class people are all Labour voters, and you kind of subvert
They
that.
mostly were. I mean, it's not like right wing, working class conservatism is a new thing. You look back to the 1992 election; it was perceived to be won by Mondeo
Hmm.
man, right? Which is the idea of working class made good in the southeast. And blue collar conservatism is here to stay. I think. That's been an emerging trend for a long time. I don't think Labour have won the popular vote in England since 2001. And
Mm.
that's quite a stark statistic for Labour, isn't it? That even if you still think of maybe 2005 as part of the heyday of New Labour, they
Yeah,
still weren't ahead in England. So that problem,
yeah,
this is
yeah,
this isn't by no means new. This predates Brexit. This predates everything.
yeah. Do you think the way things have gone, particularly in the last like 4 or 5 years, or kind of as long as you've really been talking about politics in your comedy in like a very open way, do you think there's any way back to a point where like both sides we sort of treat each other with a bit more respect, and you'll be able to say what you think on question time without coming in for a shit ton of abuse? Do you think that's possible
Well, no,
now,
but
or
I
do you
think
think
that
we've gone
the
too far?
social media, it's more about the medium, which is social media will remain like that. And if you just accept it, which I have now, the first couple of times the first time I went on Question Time, I got overwhelmingly good feedback. It wasn't a particularly bad experience.
Hmm.
A lot of the insults that I got, the thing is, when someone says to me that Tory this or that right wing this, I tend to discount them because I think that they've shown their bias is so strong that they're seeing me only
Yeah,
for that prism. So I ignore all those insults. Those are put to one side. But then the next couple of times, certainly there was something in and around the EU when things got very tense in 2019. And
yeah,
it did affect me. I was surprised, like people really went for me. And but then it went through that. I felt a bit down. And then I was like, well, I'm still breathing. It hasn't affected any opportunities. You know what I mean? It's okay for
yeah,
people
yeah,
to hate you and think that you're stupid or project all of those things onto you. So I do think more than ever I've accepted social media for what it is. But I don't think most people do. I think that most people still, for whatever reason, even though it's clearly this focus group of nutters, it's like if you said it's a focus group of people that said, I really want to be on the focus group. And one thing that should preclude you being on a focus group is wanting to be on it.
yeah. I
And
see
so
what you mean.
and like it's just pointless, isn't it? It's like, people will say, "Oh, look at this tweet by this bigger," or "Look at this tweet by." You think it's just such a small sample size. I fully believe that There are
Yeah.
arsewipes. This is a country of 66 million people. Of course, there are arsewipes, and of course they're going to be the loudest people. If you look overall, people's attitudes overall have improved. Their attitudes become more liberal on a lot of fronts, but for some
Yeah, yeah.
reason, we want to take the evidence of that little panel of dickheads. And
Yeah.
I think if you take that on board, despite all the evidence to the contrary, as a fair gauge of human nature, I think maybe you want to be angry, perhaps.
Yeah. Yeah, it's you're very pragmatic about it, but it's also kind of depressing that you've sort of arrived at a place where it's like, well, it's here to stay, so we just
Yeah.
have to live with it. But
Yeah,
you're right.
it's like,
I think
in
you're right.
pantomime, if in pantomime people say he's behind you, and on Twitter they say you disgust me, I don't want to see him be. That's what it is. Though if you approach it on those terms, then it feels better.
Yeah, I think it was Spike Milligan who said that everyone in the world's an idiot, and once you just accept that, it makes everything a bit more palatable. You
Yeah,
just
I
once
think people
your worldview is people are morons, then everything else makes sense.
Yeah, but the you are one too. Like
Yes, yeah, yeah.
you're part of that, and I think what may be the difference between me and certainly some political comics is that I don't I don't I don't I'm not high status, if you know what I mean. Like I don't
Yeah,
see myself. People perceive me as intelligent or not. It doesn't bother me too much. I like delving into funny things and interesting things, and I'm happy to run the risk of people thinking I'm stupid. Whereas I think that
sure.
political comedy perhaps is often associated with very high status. Like, listen to me, I'm the voice on this. Whereas my voice is more that I've got a hunch on something, but I'm happy
Yeah,
to
yeah.
explore the inconsistencies in that hunch.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good place to come from. It's very relatable for an audience as well. Geoff, there's so much that I do want to talk to you about, but time's marching on, and you've very kindly given up your time to tell me all about your dream dinner party. So
Mm.
before we get into the specifics of your guest list, are you someone who kind of enjoys a dinner party? And what's the tone of a Geoff Norcott dinner party?
I'll be honest, no, I'm not. Like I'm very restless. I'm very restless. Like I don't like being sat down. I mean, when I go for meals at restaurants, I often think I wish I could agree up front how long it would last because I like to be free. I like to, and those dinners that go on for like 2.5 hours, and the worst
Yeah,
thing
yeah.
for me is when the waiter comes a couple of times and people go, "Oh, we haven't even looked at the menu yet." I get so enraged because I'm like, just look at them. I want to eat, like, because to me, getting a drink and some food is how I relax in that situation.
Yeah, yeah.
And some people, it's not just that people send the waiter away. There's something about the performative way that they do that. It's like I'm holding court so much, it wouldn't even occur to me to think whether or not I want fucking bread or something.
Well, this is your dream dinner party, so
Mm.
you can decide how long it takes for the dinner to come and everything. It's
Say
all in
90,
your control,
90
this one.
minutes, 90 minutes to 2 hours, between 1.5 and 2 hours.
That sounds like a good plan. You'll
Yeah.
you'll have an agenda you'll get through in that time,
And
and
then
then
we go
that's
out. We
enough.
go to the pub after that. I like, a bit more space.
Oh, I like that. Well, where would you, if you could have dinner with this group of people anywhere in the world, where would you choose to do it?
I mean, if I'd like to be in a spacious restaurant. I'd like it to be on. Circular tables are a problem, aren't they? Because then you're still at a farthest point from someone else. Maybe like in a semi booth with a rectangular table. Um,
I
But
like
then
that.
with a booth, people are hemmed in as well. Like I like freedom, essentially. So
Yeah,
let's say it's in my house, but with the promise that we'll go to my local later.
that sounds wonderful. That sounds brilliant. Well, your first guest is someone that iPhone users will be familiar with, whether they like it or not.
Hmm.
He's a legendary singer, songwriter, philanthropist, fronted one of the biggest bands in the world for over 40 years. You're inviting Bono to your
Yeah,
dinner party. When did you first become a fan of Bono?
it's when I was about teenage. I was about 13, 14, and my mate Mick, who was always just ahead of music, he had listened to Actung Baby, and he was into it. And I think his
Hmm.
dad had the Joshua Tree on cassette. And I just
Right.
thought, like, I'm an optimistic, enthusiastic person. I like to have my head up, look into the sky, and there's something about their music, particularly on the Joshua Tree, that just felt like anthemic and it was just so positive. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and it was quite, a lot of it was quite high tempo. But when I listened to Actung Baby, I just felt like it was such interesting music, and I felt like I possessed this incredible secret. I was on the bus with my Walkman and listened to these sort of dark sounds, and so things like Zoo Station just sounded and still sounds so futuristic and otherly. I thought I
Yeah,
just thought
yeah.
one of the coolest thing in the world. And then I went to my first ever gig, and my first ever gig was Zoo TV at Wembley, and it was the night
Okay.
that they brought out Salman Rushdie. I don't know if you remember, but
Oh no.
he'd gone to ground because there was this author. He produced a
Yeah,
book.
yeah, the fatwa against him,
He had the
yeah.
fatwa, on his head, and he was so out of public sight. So it was his first appearance for ages. So he
Wow.
appeared, and then they also had like a live link up with Sarajevo, and there was some emotive. And I was like, oh my god, like this huge rock and roll spectacle with these political statements. I just thought, is this what gigs are? Are they always like this?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I realised that I'd peaked at the very beginning. I never went to a gig as good as that.
That is certainly setting the bar very, very high. Is that something like that gig in particular? Is that something you'd want to talk to him about if you had him there at your dinner party?
Well, I suppose when you have like, the good thing is that you almost want to say to people like, because they probably don't remember most things, right? You say, do you remember that show you did in Boston in 2001? They'll go, yeah, oh yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
let's start us with gigs, But I think that he would remember that one, because
Yeah.
it went down in folklore. It just was so important to me, and just the exhilaration, and also that it was slightly. I suppose this is something that's been interesting to me is artistically just being. Can you be a bit ahead of the curve, just a bit, not like loads,
Mm,
but
hmm.
just what's the next thing, and it just looked like something from the future, the whole set and the grandeur of the big intro, and I think with Bono, like it became U2 were everyone loved U2, and then everyone loved to hate U2, and then I think it's become almost standard that people give U2 sticks. It's almost become a
Yeah.
cliche, with that album dropping on. And can I say on a technical point about that album, right? So
Oh, yeah.
everyone got so uptight. Like, oh my god, what's this U2 shit on my iPhone? Geez, what is? Oh my god, like their iPod was this
Yeah.
sanctity of brilliant music. He's poisoned the well. It was you had to download it still yourself. So it was essentially a thumbnail, right? It was a token.
Ah.
This is where narratives get twisted. The same happens with politics, right?
Yeah.
It was a token that you had to press to then you had to choose to download it. All people got was a
That's
free
interesting.
token to download an album, and they got so bent out of
And
shape.
people got so worked up about the option of hearing you two.
Well, it was just a way of people going online. Essentially, all people wanted to do is go online and go, "I love great music." Me, do you know me? The music I love
Yeah,
is
yeah.
so great. I'll tell you something, guys. I don't like you too, which means I have good taste.
Well, Bono as a kind of figure, even outside of music, obviously musically he's kind of legendary, and he's collaborated with like pretty much every kind of hero, like from Sinatra to Willie Nelson. I mean, he's amazing.
King.
But outside of music as well, he's a very interesting guy, quite a divisive figure.
Mm.
Would you have any concerns that he'd ruffle some feathers at your dinner party, or is that kind of what you're hoping for a little bit?
Well, looking at Pete, by all accounts, he is likable. Like he's friends with quite a wide range of people. He's
Hmm.
very very short, but so but apparently quite pugnacious as well. Like from the bit of
Oh yeah,
Dublin that he came from. He had to stick up for himself.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
uh, so no, I think if anything, looking down the list of who I got, but not, pulling back the curtain, I think he'd probably be the sort of talisman of the group. There was a story
Okay.
once that when Robbie Williams was like kind of a bit up the wall and a bit, strung out, he went to
Mm.
Bono's mansion and Bono played bingo with him. Maybe he took like pity on the young man that was partying too hard and just thought, I'm going to show you, you know,
Bring him down to earth a little bit.
yeah, I mean, down to you're still in Bono's mansion playing bingo, but um, and he, I just think he's, and there is also, there's the issues with the taxes with you two and other things.
Yeah.
I think he's not perfect, but I think that I suppose what he because if you look at the people that have generally annoyed me artistically, I don't like virtue signalers, so it is strange that I like him.
Yeah, he's very outspoken about it. But then again, I guess that's something maybe you guys share. Like, you're outspoken about your views, as is Bono, and he kind of stands by his convictions in the same way that you do, albeit if the views are maybe occasionally a bit different.
I think he's got a sense of humour about himself. I do get that impression. Like there's if you know the band well enough and the lyrics well enough, he's
Yeah.
aware. There was a lyric of his once upon a time. Those who can't do often have to preach. You know, like I think
Okay. Yeah.
he was playing that quote about those who can't teach, and you know, a lot
Yeah. Yeah.
of Bono was quite preachy. There was an old joke about Bono, wasn't there? That yeah, sort of dead rock star goes up to heaven and they see a guy in fly shades and sort of black PVC, and he's kind of talking to the group, and they go, "Jesus, you know, is that Bono?" And they go, "No, that's just Jesus. He just thinks that he's Bono."
I like that. What would you be hoping for from Bono? Like, would you be hoping
You
once
get
you
an
guys
idea.
hit the local afterwards, a wee bit of a tune, or
Yeah, I think he likes a bit of a sing along down the pub. I think he'd kick the pace on a bit with the drinking. You need that in every group. You need, like I say,
absolutely?
need a talisman. To be honest, I'm probably that guy socially in groups. If I think like we need to get a bit drunk here to make this interesting,
Yeah,
I will introduce like a shot. I don't call them shots. I call them game changers because I think they're. Because you kind of got if you do a shot of Sambuca or something like that, there's going to be 40 minutes where things will be a bit different. Like, it's guaranteed. Rolling the dice on that.
I like that. It's kind of like rolling a dice and seeing what direction the evening goes in. That's fun.
It could go curly, it could go weird, but you know, if you just want, if you want to, because you know you will recover from that, and you can then choose whether or not to gambling. You know, you are. If you lose the first time, you are on a high into nothing. But I think that there was a gig that you two did out in Sarajevo years ago, and they'd been playing for ages. This was shortly after the war out there, and he went out and got smashed the night before the gig, and he almost lost his voice in the gig. So there's plenty.
Oh my god!
He's not
wow.
really very professional. He's actually not cool, really. But what it suggests, the man does like a night out.
I like it. Well, that is setting the tone for a dinner party with your first guest. And your next guest, again, is someone who's another complex figure. He was part of the crazy gang from Wimbledon in the 80s and 90s, later became a TV presenter. You got John Fashanu coming to the dinner party.
Big Fash, yeah. I mean,
you grew up in Wimbledon, didn't you? So you were a Wimbledon fan, I'm assuming?
Yeah, I went through that journey with that side, you know, around 86 and through winning the cup. And Fash was around for a few years after that as well. Unlike a lot of the he did stay at the club for a while.
When I was reading about him today, he sounds like he was mad. Like,
no, he's a
violent, temperamental.
Yeah.
Crikey.
So he was quite a violent player. You know, he took out quite a few people. Gary Stevens involved in that Vinnie Jones tackle on where him and Vinnie. I mean, who wants to be on the end of that? Vinnie Jones and sandwiched Gary
brutal.
Stevens in a tackle. He also took out Gary Mabbott's eye socket with an elbow.
Yeah. I saw the photo earlier.
He's underrated as a player. You know, I think he was devastating in the air, and I always think footballers that can head a ball are underrated because it's essentially a volley with your face, isn't it? Like, the bravery of it doesn't get enough credit.
Yeah. Do you think he deserved more kind of England caps than he got? He only got the 2.
He got the 2, yeah. No, is the truth. I think that I just don't think that he suited. You know, the way that Wimbledon played at the time was perfect for Fash, but I don't think the way that England played would have ever suited that. I suppose the closest to him would have probably been Shearer in a way, which was, you know, very good in the air. You know, if you get service into Shearer like that, and also Fash was quite good from distance. Where he didn't have much game was one-on-one finishing. He was very bad.
Right. In 2007, the Times named him the 22nd in the list of 50 worst players ever to have played in the Premiership. Do you think that's harsh?
That's wrong. I mean, I'm just going to say that is not correct. He had a great record from the penalty spot, almost up there with Matt Letitia. You know, and he played. Yeah, I think that is. I think, you know, if you were talking about most divisive figures, you know, or Romans, like, you can make an argument for that. I think as a player, I think sometimes that's just a bit of a simplistic reading of his kind of persona and what he did on the pitch. I could show you like some of the goals he scored from distance were exceptional. But
Well,
he's you know he is he's a confusing guy. You know, he's been in with his brother, and the legacy of how he
yeah.
treated his brother when his brother came out. It's dodgy, man.
Yeah, like it's it's very difficult to sugarcoat it. Like he was very cruel about that. There was also the match fixing scandal. I know charges were dropped, but yeah, he's a complex guy to say the least. Like, what would you want to pick his brain about if you had him
Well,
there at your dinner party?
I just want to know what is going on. Also, you know, he was involved in a corruption, you know, a bribery
Oh,
scam, which he got acquitted of when I was a Wimbledon fan. But he was accused that he'd taken money to throw football matches. Now, a bit of context: when I was about 14, 15, for some reason I was able to write reports for local newspaper. But I said in a report. Was John Fashanu trying to throw away the points, the ball, or both after he'd handled the ball for a penalty once already and did it again in the 90th minute? Now, I wasn't at that time thinking Fash has taken a bung here, but
yeah,
it went to court. And, you know, certainly as Wimbledon fans, we could all remember times when Fash came back into the penalty area when he didn't need to and
yeah,
and
yeah.
you know, took out players. So yeah, I would just love to get a sense of the man. I'm not saying that he's a good human being. I'm just saying that I think
Yeah.
you've got to have that firecracker in there, you know, of a dinner party, and it could be Fash.
He's such an interesting character to choose because the temptation maybe for a lot of people would be to choose people that they just really like and would have a really nice relaxed evening with. But it sounds like you kind of want to mix things up and sort of challenge yourself almost a little bit with this guy here.
Yeah, well, I suppose I've always been like that. You know, I don't think I don't like. I suppose like both my parents, which you know, they were both complicated and challenging people in a way. So
Hmm.
therefore, you know, I think Fash, and I would love to see how Fash would be challenged by the people around him. It's worth saying as well. You know, you mentioned earlier about him doing TV presenting. That was while he was still a footballer. So I
Yeah.
think he was the first footballer to wear red boots as well. You know,
Oh yeah.
sort of ahead of the game
Yeah.
in a lot of ways. He also had one of the shittest catchphrases ever with a awooga. We'll remember from Gladiators.
From Gladiators, of course. Yeah.
So he had something in him, you know. But both him and his brother were came, you know, they were orphans, you know. So
Yeah.
they came
Yeah.
from Bernardo's home. So you know, whatever difficulty is in him, you know, partly came from, you know, he had a very, very tough upbringing. It's not to excuse
Yeah.
all of it, but I maybe want to get him talking. You know, what's the real Fash?
He's a fascinating choice, Jeff. I mean, definitely, I can see the appeal of having him there. He would be a brilliant person to kind of dig a little deeper into. But your third guest is she's royalty, at least in a galaxy far, far away. She was
Hmm.
an actor, writer, comedian, mental health activist who rose to fame as Princess Leia in Star Wars. You've got Carrie Fisher coming to your dinner party. I'm making the assumption now that you're a fan from Star Wars, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, I love Star Wars. I loved it from, you know, like a lot of, not just blokes, obviously, but boys of my generation in particular.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was, and you know, Carrie Fisher is. Yeah, it wasn't just that she was beautiful but she was sassy. You know, they talk a lot about, you know, where are all the positive female role models in films. Well, we had one back in 1977. You know, Princess
yeah,
Leia. You know,
yeah,
one of the first things she does is take the gun off Han Solo, and says
yeah,
effectively, "I'm going to rescue myself." And you know, doesn't do any harm that she looks amazing as she does all of it,
yeah.
but she still
She
does
was
it.
a proper ass kicker. How did you feel when you saw the kind of the more recent Star Wars movies? And obviously, she was back in those. Were
Yeah, I
you
mean,
glad to see her there? Or
I don't know. I think that, I mean, you're talking to a Star Wars nerd now. If you want to get into a sequel trilogy chat, it could. I think that they were a bit of a mess, and I don't know if it should have. It's strange because I grew to love the prequels eventually, because
oh wow,
they added to the main trilogy. They did add to the
Jeff, of
narrative.
all your controversial opinions, I think defending the prequels,
Have a
that's
look.
got to be your most out there opinion.
You look, they obviously have flaws, but if you look at them, they have stood the test of time quite well. And then there's certain themes in them that are weirdly prescient about, separatists and trade federations, all that stuff that seemed boring and a bit, what is he going on about now? Ever since Trump and Brexit, you're going, oh, right, yeah, okay. And let's not get into who the EU would be and who, I don't think it's as clear cut as you might think. But yeah, that added to the story. Whereas I felt that the sequel trilogy, certainly in terms of the main characters, just didn't really add to the story. It wasn't. I think the first one was good. The second one was an interesting film, The Last Jedi.
It was a bit mad.
I don't know if it's a good Star Wars film, but it was an interesting film. And then Rise of Skywalker sort of had to tie up way too much stuff to be a cohesive film in itself. So within that context, having to use old little bits of footage of Carrie Fisher here and there, and she wasn't by all accounts on her best form at that time, which she always struggled with drugs. So yeah, it was great to see them. Certainly, The Force Awakens, it was great to see them all again. But yeah, I think that maybe they would have been better going down the road of a brand new idea straight away rather than trying to.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're such a Star Wars fan, and of all the people you could have invited that were associated with those films, why is it that you chose Carrie Fisher to come to your dinner party?
Well, I mean, I'll be honest. These days in comedy, you got to have a couple of females in. So I want to have balance. Of course, I want to have balance. I think that she was funny. She'd be challenging because she's been around egotistical men her whole life, right? She had a strong figure for a mother, so I'd imagine nobody would intimidate Carrie Fisher. So with Bono and John Fashanu, she's not going to suffer fools gladly. And I don't know, it is about sassy women, like women that can cut men down with like a line or two or a look. There's just something. I think that I've always been drawn to women like that, just strong. I think strong women is one thing. I think sassy women is another characteristic that I've always gravitated.
Yeah. Outside of Star Wars, did you enjoy her? I don't know if you watched Catastrophe. She was so great in that.
She was Harry Met Sally. She was great in that.
Yeah. And she did so much kind of writing and script editing and stuff. She was such a multi-talented creative person and really frank, really honest. What would you be hoping for from her at a dinner party?
Well, fun as well. I mean, look, in the end, she did have problems with drink, but let's just say this was in the good time. I think her and Bono would get on famously. I do immediately. I think those two are going to click. And I think that she would be, just the photos of it. There is that problem, isn't it? People have so much like light in their eyes that it also means that they have their demons too. But when you catch them on a good evening, I'm not. Obviously, I'm not like famous. But I'm not that person in a social situation, if you know what I mean. I'm not. I'm not the life and soul of the party. I can be loud sometimes, but I'm not that kind of brimming person, that just everyone kind of crowds around. I've never been that person socially.
She's one of those people that just immediately seems like you say, there is that spark about her, or there's that kind of just extra something that sounds a bit cliched, but she really would kind of. You would notice her in a room above other people. Like there's just something about her. Yeah. I mean, would you have any burning questions for her, like about her life or her work, or would you just want to kind of just have a bit of a laugh with her and not ask her too much about herself, or how would that go?
I suppose what I'm interested in is when people get famous for something huge before, because I still think things that happened in my early 20s were before I really knew who I was. So I think it must be weird to emerge into adult life with that still going on, and then just throughout your life getting a grip on what it meant to be Princess Leia, to be that character. How it feels, and just I wonder, is it a curse or a blessing? It's a cliche and it's an old question, like whether or not she would have rather not been that person. Whether she would have been, known for something else. I think that, certainly with the other Star Wars actors, Harrison Ford has a very grumpy relationship with doing anything ever.
Yeah.
And being Han Solo, he's very nonplussed about the whole thing. Whereas Mark Hamill was very angry, you know, after Star Wars, very distant from the Star Wars mythology and all the kind of fan conventions, and then changed. But with that might have just been because there was way less work, and he thought, I better suddenly rediscover the love for this. But he you know, he sort of embraced having been Luke Skywalker, and then I think
Yeah.
sort of started to realise how rare it is for any actor to have just had something that's connected with people on that level.
That's the thing. I can never imagine doing anything or being part of anything that like means so much to people. Obviously, Star Wars means something to you, but there are also fans to whom it's not just like important, but it's kind of everything, and it sort of or defines them in a way. And it must be like a bit of a pressure to kind of be that and mean that to people, I suppose. But yeah, fascinating choice for a dinner party and a great counterpoint to the two people that you've already invited before.
I hope so, yeah.
Well, your next guest is an author who's been listed for the Booker Prize twice, and some of the Times named as one of the 50 greatest British writers since 1945. Again, this is someone who's courted his fair share of controversy. You're inviting Martin Amis.
Yeah, so when I was at university, it was round about, the mid-90s. It was the time of the New Lad Revolution, and it's hard to explain now, but, these sort of passages of time with feminism and, questioning of masculinity, they are cyclical. So we had the new man at the beginning of the 90s, right? Loads of cardigan wearing guys photographing themselves holding babies and all that kind of stuff. And then, there was this reassertion. But the interesting thing about the New Lad Revolution was that it had people like Blur and Oasis, and it was quite, you had people like David Baddiel in it. And then, so who's the comedian that's on side? You were looking for who's the rock stars that are on side. And it was just, we like beer, we like football, we like women. It was radical things to say. And I'm not sure they ever really go out of fashion with young men. And then Martin Amis was, the novelist.
Yeah. Well, when did you first? So you started reading his work at uni, or?
Yeah, so we had our reading list at uni, and it was very. I went to Goldsmiths, his liberal arts college, and it was very, very lefty, very save Cuba, very save the whale, save loads of stuff that was miles away. And and I never fully fitted in. And this is an interesting thing again when you talk about comedy. When you eventually find your comic voice, you sort of realise it was there all along. And I felt out of place with that. And I did, women in literature courses, and it was all like, they sort of seem to venerate all the right people in inverted commas,
Right.
And I thought, I like these books, but they don't really speak to me. And then I started reading Martin Amis. I read Money. And it, there's a lot of swearing in it, there's a lot of sex, drugs, and there's just bad language, and I just I liked it, and it was well written, but I could tell it was smart. I could tell it was clever too, and that meant that I was allowed. It was naughty then because it was like a loophole. I was like, well, I think I'm getting smarter reading it, but I'm also engaging with the things that excite me.
Is he someone who, like, you have fond memories of liking him at a time, but maybe it hasn't carried on? Or like, because we're speaking today is the publication of his first novel in 6 years.
Is it? Well,
is something?
Yeah, I didn't know that.
But is he someone that you kind of still get excited by, or is it someone that you remember fondly?
It is. It's a bit like U2, really, because I think that the time that I got into it was around the time of their sort of peak of their creative powers. Like U2 around Acting Baby, and then Zooropa. Then they've had flourishes since then. You still think, I'd still probably say that a decent, like a moderately good U2 album or Martin Amis novel, I'm probably going to enjoy more than most other sort of competitors, if you know what I mean. Even if it's not their best work, so I'd certainly check out Martin Amis's latest novel. But yeah, that time I kind of got into him around, he was sort of at the zenith of his powers. It's still, like I think Money and London Fields were in the 80s. Times Arrow was early 90s. And then he had one called The Information. The Information was a weird book for me because he mentioned the character from Wimbledon who I knew. So I still don't know how that happened.
Oh, wow.
A bloke called Stephen Cousins. Now, I don't know if he just came up with that name, but so it got closer and closer. And Amis always had a fascination with the working classes. Like he always seemed to think that there was something more truthful and honest in there, more funnier. as well, more creative with language. I do think that about working class people. That I think that it's more, the language is more visceral, it's more blunt, it's more honest, and I think that so consequently that spoke to me too. But yeah, probably
Yeah.
with him and you too, there's probably a bit of symmetry there.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, also, I see a bit of symmetry with you, and again, it's that thing of conviction, of belief, and being outspoken. Like he's courted controversy. 2006, he said some reprehensible things about Muslim people in relation to terrorism, that there should be stripping away of rights and that kind of thing.
Mm.
Do you think he's someone who you would enjoy getting into like the issues with, like having a good
Yeah, I don't know.
discussion about
I've sort of,
things?
he's maybe the one on the list that I've probably put down because I've been a fan and I find him interesting. Or maybe he's the one
Hmm.
that I haven't thought enough about how he'd fit into the dinner party. I don't know what he'd be like socially. I mean, novelists generally are quite on the edges, aren't they? They're quite
Mm.
like what's his name?
Live in their heads a lot,
Simon
perhaps.
Barnes and all that. It's the nature of the job, isn't it? So I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know if he gets stuck in. I mean, he certainly seemed to think that alcohol and making merry was a good thing as evidenced by his book. I don't know what age he is now. He's got to be pretty old himself now.
I think he's 71 now.
Yeah, yeah. So I think he could fit in. I think him and Bono would get on all right. I think
Yeah?
I think Bono would want to chat to him more,
Yeah. Well,
perhaps.
Bono seems to fancy himself as a bit of a philosopher as well, so maybe a bit
Yeah,
of a novelist's mind going on there too.
yeah. I do think I don't know what Carrie Fisher would make of him, but again, Carrie Fisher's a writer. I think,
Yeah, that's true.
and
That's
all the
true.
rest of them are very outgoing, so perhaps he could slot in quite nicely.
Yeah, I'd say so. And he's got something in common with you as well, in that you both have experience of teaching. He was a teacher at university level, but obviously you were secondary schools. So yeah, maybe that's another area of conversation that you guys could get into as well about teaching.
Yeah.
Well, your final guest, Geoff, is someone who you already know very well. I imagine you've already had a good few dinners with this person. Your final dream dinner party guest is your mum.
Yeah, so I should say, just for your sake, that she passed away 11 years ago. But I only do that
Okay.
because I've got you, because she's been gone long enough that I try and spare people the awkwardness of making.
Thank you for that. I wasn't sure. I'd seen some of your stand-up where you talk about how your dad had passed away.
Yeah, yeah.
I
Well,
wasn't sure about your mum.
quite a long time ago now. But it does happen that people go, so, she'll be up for this still, and you have to kind of make it. But yeah,
Sure.
she hasn't been around for a while. But like, if I mentioned about charismatic women, and
Yeah.
maybe the reason that I am drawn to somebody like Carrie Fisher is because my mum was like that, full of sass.
Yeah.
She was an orphan herself, and but she had, she was, like the character of Phoebe in Friends. There's this backstory.
Yeah.
Where she kind of grew up rough. I never really bought it with Phoebe. I thought it was an interesting character, but I just knew whenever she said those lines, I thought, I don't believe you. But my mum
Right.
really did have that life, and
Oh, wow.
consequently, she was another one that didn't suffer fools glad. I don't know if anyone suffers fools gladly. I don't know if people go, "Oh, look, a fool! How brilliant!"
But maybe some people are polite around them and kind of don't want to
Not
ruffle
gladly. I
feathers.
mean, it should be suffers fools politely or silently, or humbly, not gladly. Because if you think they're a fool, or maybe some people find a fool makes them feel better about their own intellectual shortcomings. But she was just really interested around people, and she would often get to the heart of people very quickly. If I had a new friend or a girlfriend, or my sister had a new boyfriend, she'd work them out,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I read a little bit about you've spoken about her in a few interviews, and you said that she was very left field, and while she could be diplomatic, she could also be blunt with language and opinion.
Mm.
And it sounds like she would be such a perfect fit for this group that you've put together as well.
Oh, she would, and her and Bono would stay in touch for life, and it would be galling for me that Bono would be way more taken with my mother than he would be with me. But she certainly had, I think so she was an orphan when she was 5, but what we know of her mother was that her mother was some sort of actor, some sort of actress that just got in trouble. She, I mean, she got about a bit. Look, put it this way. She had, I know that's politically incorrect, but I don't care. It's a long time ago. She had 3 kids by 3 different, so there was,
Sure.
she got in over her head really, and my mum was the least sort of, she kind of put her efforts into the two kids that needed it most in a way, because they had certain
Okay.
problems. So my mum was orphan, but I do wonder if there was a performance-based streak in my mum. But the anxiety that she had from her being orphan meant that she never really went for it. But she was definitely
Yeah.
a showman, for want of a better word.
Well, she sounds fascinating because you've spoken about how she stood as a counsellor for the Lib Dems,
Yeah.
and how she was a big influence in kind of your comedy as well. I think in the same interview that I read, you said that she, the way she spoke and the way she was quite forward and sort of straight to the point, that sort of influenced the way that you think of comedy too.
Yeah, well, she didn't mince her words. I think certainly she was conciliatory when she needed to be. She was a good diplomat. I mean, put it this way: she knew how to de-escalate tensions once she escalated them. And I certainly think that in my comedy, I sort of do that. You play with the line, then you sort of go, okay, it may have been breached a little bit. I pull it back, and it's an ongoing push, tug of war between you and the audience. Sometimes, certainly when I'm in Edinburgh. And yeah, she was like that. She's just really smart, and not the kind of there's always that thing of degrees and kind of academic qualifications, but just naturally very quick to pick things up and sharp-minded. I think her and Carrie Fisher would be thick as thieves.
It sounds like they're kindred spirits. Well, what do you think there would be any qualities that your mum would have brought to a dinner party that maybe the others wouldn't have, or how would she? What would set your mum apart at the dinner party?
Rules. She'd probably be, like the matriarch of the group, so that she'd be probably set the moral standards of the group. I think she'd probably have a word with Fash.
Oh, I'd give anything to see that.
Just bring him down, Fash. Let's have a word, right? What's going on? She would just. I think he would really be drawn to her as well. Like he at the end of the night, he'd say, "I'd really love to continue this conversation." That sort of one.
Yeah.
She was, she was good, like because she was good at picking up waifs and strays. Like me and my sister, we used to hate it when we were kids living on the council estate because she'd always be trying to, on some mission to save someone. But it was definitely a thing.
She just sounds fantastic, and your whole group that you've put together there sounds like it might not be the most relaxed dinner party in the world. Some kind of big personalities in there. But it's going to be a bloody interesting one.
I think it would get to a point, there'd be a tipping point where it would be tense and then it would release. And then it wouldn't be one of those ones where everyone was faking it to get on to begin with. It would go the other way because what is that? There's that rule, isn't there, in business? Swarm, storm, reform or something of the way that groups...
Oh, I don't know this.
About the way that groups, like on Big Brother in the first episodes, there would be that thing where they would always be grinning and, oh, hi, you're so amazing. And then storm of activity. And then and maybe there's another stage where they'd all fall about and then they'd reform. They'd all Whereas I think this would start with the sort of falling out. And the understanding would be reached and therefore be more long lasting and meaningful.
I like that. That sounds like it would be an event, a night to remember at the very least.
Yeah.
Well, Geoff, it's a fascinating group of people. You're at your place, followed by the pub. The last thing we need to know is what menu you'd be putting together for these people. Are you an enthusiastic cook?
Not really. I didn't really think about cooking. I'm good at sort of fragrant style Thai dishes, which sounds maybe not surprising, but I would go with, I think, something prawn based to begin with, something simple, a bit light, prawn cocktail. I'm going for prawn cocktail, maybe a bit fancy lemongrass, I don't know, something like that. And
lovely. Yeah.
And then I do chicken udon noodles with chicken and.
Ooh.
Yeah, I'm really hungry at the moment. I just realised saying this, but I like with chili and one of those kind of curries, a bit of soy sauce, all that sort of stuff, and then I can't really cook dessert. So dessert would be, I'd get that caterpillar cake from M&S. Everyone loves that cake.
Brilliant. That is the great equalizer. There doesn't matter how much money you got in the bank. Everybody loves.
Everyone loves because the chocolate's just a bit thicker than it needs to be, doesn't? And you get that occasional thick wedge of it.
Geoff, that sounds like such a cracking dinner party. Just brilliant. thank you so much, Geoff, for giving up your time to chat about this, giving it all the thought you did. If our listeners want to stay across your tour dates and if they want to see more from you on social media and that kind of thing, how can we stay in touch with you?
The best way is just to follow me on Twitter, Geoff Norcott, Geoff spelled with a G, Norcott, Norcott. And my podcast, What Most People Think, which is a weekly podcast, which is sort of seeking to look at the topical issues of the day, but maybe coming at them from an angle that's not, a totally familiar in comedy. So those are the two things, mainly. I've got, about 5 or 6 tour dates that I hope to complete before the end of the year in Shrewsbury, in Worthing, in Canterbury. But if you follow me for a little while on Twitter, you'll hear about it soon enough, and then you'll probably
Sounds great. Well, Geoff, thanks so much. I'll add links to all those things into the episode description, and I do hope that everything stays okay and that you get to enjoy the rest of that tour. And thanks so much again for taking the time to speak to me.
Thanks for having me on.
Cheers, mate. All the best. Bye-bye.
Cheers, bye.
That was great. Geoff Norcott's Dream Dinner Party. That is one group of people who wouldn't be short of a strong opinion or two. I really enjoyed hearing about that party, so huge thanks to Geoff for taking the time to talk. We've added links into the episode description to take you to Geoff's Twitter account, his website, and his podcast. I've been having an absolute blast making this series, and I very much hope you're enjoying it too. If you're new to the series, you can check out all our previous episodes with some extraordinary guests. And if you wanted to rate, share, subscribe, recommend all that stuff, that would be ever so lovely. The Dinner Party is a Jericho comedy production. If you want to hear any more from me, you can visit www.conormcreynolds.com and have a look at some of my other radio, podcast, writing and comedy work. I'll be back with another episode next week chatting to a brilliant guest all about their dream dinner party. But until then, thanks so much for listening and bye-bye.